The humans skinned Governor Dranak alive, and the Gorn will never forget his agonized screams. Speaker slouched in a chair inside his dwelling on the Gorn homeworld of Gornax, his reptilian head cradled in clawed hands. His scales were matted with sweat. Dark bags hung under his eyes. He looked traumatized, utterly exhausted. The door swung open, and Nexar strode in, pausing at the sight of his longtime friend looking so haggard. "By the egg, Speaker, you look like death warmed over. What happened?" Nexar asked. "I just returned from an emergency session of the Galactic Council. A grave crisis has erupted between the hegemony and the humans, and it's all that idiot Dranak's fault." "Governor Dranak, what did he do?" Speaker took a shuddering breath. "A human trade delegation arrived at his colony for scheduled negotiations, but that arrogant fool took offense at having to deal with them. He seized their ships, imprisoned their crews." "Oh, it gets worse. When the humans protested, Dranak had their ambassador dragged before him in chains, a human named Harry Hill. Dranak leaned forward, slapped him, and said the Gorn answer to no one, that the humans need to learn their place." Nexar's scales paled. That utter fool, doesn't he realize what he's done? How the humans will react? "He does now," Speaker whispered, a haunted look in his eyes. "What the humans did in retaliation is seared into my mind. It was like nothing I could have imagined. If we cannot make this right, I fear it will mean the end of the hegemony itself." Ambassador Hill slowly raised his head. "Murder in his eyes," Spiker said, his voice trembling. He spoke in a tone that dripped with barely restrained fury. "Governor Dranak, I respectfully request that you release me and my people immediately. We came here in good faith to engage in peaceful negotiations for the betterment of both our peoples. Assaulting a diplomatic envoy is an act of war." Speaker took a shaky breath before continuing. Dranak scoffed dismissively, saying that the humans should be grateful the Gorn deigned to allow them to grovel at their feet. At this, Ambassador Hill coldly replied, "I will give you one final opportunity to release us, and issue a formal apology for this egregious breach of protocol. I strongly suggest you take it." "And Dranak's response?" Nexar asked, leaning forward. "The fool just laughed," Speaker exclaimed. He leaned back in his chair, flicking his hand contemptuously, as if to shoo away an annoying insect. Ambassador Hill nodded slowly, then calmly reached up and removed a small device from his shirt collar. He spoke a single word into it. "Carthage." Spiker paused, a haunted look in his eyes. For a moment nothing happened. Dranak even made a snide comment about the famed human commander calling for his mommy. But then a low rumble built and the ground began to shake. Dranak's eyes widened as he leapt up from his chair in alarm. "By the egg, what happened next?" Nexar whispered. A thunderous boom split the air as a gargantuan human warship, easily 10 times the size of the largest Gorn dreadnought, materialized directly above the governor's palace, emerging from some kind of cloaking field. As the palace guards stood frozen in terror, dozens of hulking combat-armored human marines beamed into the throne room in flashes of light, instantly cutting down the guards with ruthless efficiency. Speaker shuddered, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. The human ship began systematically annihilating every Gorn military vessel and installation from orbit with casual ease, its impossibly powerful weaponry ripping through even the strongest shields like tissue paper. It was a display of overwhelming technological superiority, the likes of which I have never seen. As Speaker recounted the stunning events in Dranak's throne room, Nexar could only listen in rapt disbelief. Dranak, the arrogant fool, had been reduced to a snivelling wreck, throwing himself to the floor and groveling pathetically as the human marines seized him. Hill just calmly brushed off his jacket, cool as ice, and strolled over to where Dranak was pleading for mercy, Speaker said. He reached down, grabbed a fistful of Dranak's robe, and yanked him right up to eye level. Nexar's eyes widened. What did he say? In this deceptively mild tone, like he was discussing the weather, Hill informed Dranak that he was under arrest for assaulting a Federation diplomat, and that the Gorn colony was now under direct human control. Hill tapped his collar communicator, and requested a direct line to Gornax. Moments later, the Emperor himself appeared on the throne room's main screen. Nexar's jaw dropped. The Emperor? What did Hill say to him? Spicer leaned forward. He bowed all polite-like and calmly stated that while he regretted the circumstances, humanity was taking control of the colony. Said that if any Gorn forces tried to stop them, they'd be destroyed. He threatened the Emperor. As the Emperor sputtered, unable to even form a coherent sentence, Hill held up a hand and said, Your Majesty, please don't be alarmed. We only want to preserve galactic peace. I give you my word. If the hegemony doesn't take aggressive action, no further harm will come to the Gorn. We wish to be friends. Then he smiled, all disarming-like, and inclined his head as the Emperor sat there in shocked silence. Nexar shook his head slowly. I can't believe it. And the Emperor, he just accepted this. That was 3 days ago, Speaker said. Since then, the Emperor's ordered all our ships to stay well away from the colony. Nexar looked at his friend in amazement. Speaker, do the humans really have that much military power? Taking an entire planet was that easy for them? Speaker met Nexar's gaze, his eyes haunted. He nodded slowly. Nexar sat back in his chair, the scales on his head furrowing as he tried to process the enormity of what Speaker had just told him. He looked at his friend, confusion and wonder warring in his eyes. Speaker, if the humans truly possessed the capability to conquer the Gorn so effortlessly, why did they refrain from doing so? Why allow the hegemony to save face after such a blatant provocation? Spiker leaned forward, steepling his clawed fingers, a pensive expression on his reptilian face. In the aftermath of the takeover, I spoke at length with Ambassador Hill, seeking to understand the human perspective on these events. Nexar cocked his head. And what did you learn? Hill revealed that humans place immense value on diplomacy. They always seek to resolve conflicts with the minimum force required. This philosophy, he told me, was born from the hard lessons of their past. Oh? Nexar asked, intrigued. Spiker nodded. The ambassador confided that long ago, before they took to the stars, the human homeworld was racked by terrible wars. Nation fought nation, leading to unimaginable destruction and loss of life. Entire cities were obliterated, millions perished. Nexar's eyes widened. By the egg! Determined to break this cycle of violence as they ventured into space, humans vowed to always prioritize peace, even as they developed the military strength to defend themselves and their allies. Spiker paused, remembering. Hill looked me in the eye and said, We humans desire friendship and cooperation with all races, but there is a saying on our world, speak softly and carry a big stick. Nexar tilted his head. Carry a big stick, what does that mean? Hill explained that by possessing overwhelming strength, yet using it sparingly and proportionally, only when absolutely necessary, humans believe they can more effectively preserve peace than through force alone. Speaker tapped a claw on the arm of his chair. The more I reflect on it, the more wisdom I see in the human approach. Spicer's gaze turned distant. In my duties as an envoy for the Galactic Council, I've studied the histories of countless civilizations, and there's a clear pattern. When stronger nations throw their military weight around unchecked, it breeds deep resentment among the weaker races. Even if peace is achieved in the short term, the seeds of future conflict are sown. Nexar nodded slowly. I see your point. Resentment festers, old wounds don't heal. Precisely, Speaker said. But the humans, by defeating the Gorn so utterly yet choosing not to conquer, they sent a clear message. They demonstrated their values, their strength, but also their restraint. They've opened the door to a new relationship between our peoples. Nexar stroked his scaled chin thoughtfully. The Gorn certainly grasp now that the humans are not to be provoked. Indeed, Spicker replied. But more than that, I believe there's a growing realization that humanity, for all its might, is fundamentally a positive, stabilizing force in the galaxy, not a destructive, conquering one. Nexar shook his head in amazement. It's almost hard to fathom, to have that level of power, yet the wisdom and restraint to wield it so judiciously. The humans are something special, my friend, Speaker said quietly. I don't think they're like any other species we've encountered. There's a nobility to them, a greatness of spirit, even as they possess the military force to impose their will without challenge. Nexar sat back, his eyes distant as he absorbed Speaker's words. You've given me much to ponder, Speaker. The implications of humanity's role on the galactic stage, it's staggering. Speaker nodded. The galaxy is shifting, Nexar. I believe we're on the cusp of a new era, and I have a feeling humanity will be at the center of it all. Nexar shook his head slowly. To have seen what you did, Spiker, the casual power the humans wielded, I can only imagine how it must have felt to stand in the presence of beings who could extinguish our civilization with a snap of their fingers, yet stayed their hand. Spiker's eyes took on a faraway look. It was humbling, Nexar, profoundly so, to glimpse the true extent of their capabilities, to understand viscerally how outmatched we would be in a conflict. He shuddered. How did Hill strike you personally? You spoke to him at length, got a sense of the man. What was your impression? Speaker considered this. Focused, formidable, but not cruel or vindictive. There was a calm assuredness about him. He carried himself with the air of someone who knows he has the upper hand, but takes no pleasure in wielding it. Indeed, Speaker said. I left my conversations with the ambassador with a profound sense that as long as humanity walks the path of the peacemaker, the galaxy will be a safer, more stable place. But by the egg, Nexar, I pray we never give them cause to be our enemy. I fear no force in the universe could stand against them if their hand was forced. Nexar shuddered at the thought, the scales on his neck prickling. He opened his mouth to reply, to seek more insight into the enigma that was. Nexar rubbed his scaled chin thoughtfully, his brow furrowed. He leaned forward, fixing Speaker with an intense gaze. Do you really think the Gorn will change their ways after this incident? That they'll abandon their aggressive, expansionist tendencies just like that? Spicer clasped his hands together, his claws clicking softly. After the initial shock of the human intervention wore off, the Emperor convened an emergency meeting of the hegemony's top military and intelligence officials. They needed to assess what had happened, to understand the true extent of the human capabilities. Nexar leaned in, his eyes wide. And what did they find? Spiker shuddered, a haunted look passing over his face. Their findings were chilling, Nexar. The humans hadn't just outmatched the local Gorn forces. That ship, it was equipped with technologies far beyond anything the Gorn had ever seen. Impossibly powerful energy weapons that tore through our strongest shields like they were made of paper. Nigh impenetrable shielding of their own that shrugged off our heaviest ordnance like it was nothing. And that's not all, Speaker continued grimly. They had some kind of FTL system that allowed them to essentially teleport straight through the Gorn blockade and planetary defenses. Our ships couldn't even track them. Nexar shook his head in disbelief. Teleportation, that's impossible. Not for the humans, apparently. Spiker's voice was hollow. And their marines. Nexar, the Gorn couldn't even see them. Their armor seemed to bend light around it, rendering them practically invisible. Nexar sat back heavily, his mind reeling. Invisibility. Energy weapons, teleportation. Spiker, this sounds like something out of a science fiction holo novel. Speaker laughed bitterly. I wish it were, my friend. But it gets worse. The most disturbing finding of all. Gorn intelligence determined that the human vessel was merely a medium-sized cruiser, not even one of their famed dreadnoughts. Nexar felt his blood run cold. A cruiser, you mean? Spiker nodded somberly. If this is the capability of a single human cruiser, we can't even begin to imagine what their full war machine could bring to bear. The implications are... He trailed off, unable to finish. Nexar swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. What did the Emperor's advisors say? Surely they had some plan, some strategy. Speaker met Nexar's gaze, his eyes bleak. They unanimously agreed that if the humans had truly wished to seize the colony by force, absolutely nothing could have stopped them. The Gorn simply had zero capability to even slow them down, let alone win in an all-out conflict. Nexar felt a chill run down his spine. So what will we do now? What can we do? Speaker sighed. The Emperor has ordered a top-down review of all our military practices and technology, a desperate attempt to close the staggering gap between us and the humans. Nexar frowned. Can it be done? Can we catch up? Speaker shook his head slowly. Privately, the Emperor confided in me that he knows it's futile. We're centuries behind the humans, Nexar. We could never catch up, not even if by some miracle the humans ceased all technological development today. Nexar's shoulders slumped. Then what's the path forward? He asked quietly. Speaker's expression was grim. The only path is to accede to any human demands, and pray to the egg that they remain committed to diplomacy. Nexar felt a cold knot of fear settle in his stomach. So we're entirely at their mercy, he whispered. Speaker nodded, his face etched with a profound weariness. He grimaced, a bitter smile twisting his lips. In the span of a single day, the humans reduced the proudest empire in the galaxy into a vassal state, jumping at shadows. And they did it without even firing a shot. He shook his head slowly. No one will ever dare cross them again. Nexar shook his head slowly, a look of wonder on his scaled face. Speaker, I'm struggling to wrap my mind around it. The speed, the totality with which the humans have upended the galactic status quo, it's staggering. Nexar leaned forward, his gaze intent. Tell me, what have the humans done with the colony in the days since? How have they managed the transition? A wry smile tugged at the corners of Spiker's mouth. You'll scarcely believe it, Nexar. In a move that shocked everyone, the humans immediately released control back to the Gorn. Nexar's eyes widened. They did what? Spiker chuckled. Ambassador Hill personally contacted the Emperor and apologized for the regrettable necessity of the military action. He expressed his sincere hope that our two peoples could move forward in a spirit of friendship and cooperation. Nexar sat back, stunned. And then? The humans began pouring aid and resources into the colony. They repaired the damage caused by their strike in mere hours, using these incredible advanced construction drones. Speaker shook his head in amazement. I've never seen anything like it. Unbelievable, Nexar murmured. But that's not even the most shocking part, Speaker said, leaning forward. The humans shared a portion of their military technology with the Gorn forces. Nexar's jaw dropped. They shared their technology after just defeating the Gorn? Spiker nodded. Not enough to rival human strength, of course, but still a staggering leap forward for the Gorn. Decades of advancement handed over freely. Nexar was silent for a long moment, trying to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. But why? What could possibly motivate such generosity mere days after a total military humiliation? The Emperor asked the same question, Speaker said. According to my sources, when the Emperor questioned Ambassador Hill about this, the humans simply said, "Your people now understand our resolve to defend ourselves, but we also want you to know our equally strong desire for friendship and mutual progress." Nexar let out a low whistle. Remarkable. Speaker chuckled. I heard the Emperor nearly fainted on the spot. So overwhelmed was he by the human's gesture. Nexar shook his head in wonder. I can scarcely imagine. Speaker's expression sobered. I must confess, Nexar, while I applaud the human's olive branch, a part of me worries it may backfire. Nexar cocked his head. How so? The Gorn are a proud race, Speaker said. Such an abrupt shift from subjugation to charity, I fear it may breed resentment, however irrational that may be. Wounded pride can be a dangerous thing. Nexar was quiet for a moment, considering. I see your point, Speaker, but I suspect the humans have accounted for that. By so completely outmatching the Gorn, the humans have established a new paradigm, Nexar said slowly. A situation whereby the Gorn can accept human aid without losing face. Speaker's brow furrowed. I'm not sure I follow. The gap between our civilizations is now so vast that there can be no shame in accepting help from the humans. It reframes the narrative, you see. The Gorn are not weak. The humans are simply so unimaginably strong that pride becomes irrelevant. Speaker's eyes widened. I hadn't considered that. An astute observation, Nexar. Nexar smiled slightly. It's an incredibly deft bit of diplomacy when you think about it. It demonstrates not just humanity's raw military prowess, but also their nuanced understanding of Gorn psychology and culture. Speaker nodded slowly, a note of awe creeping into his voice. The more I learn about the humans, the more I realize that their greatest weapon isn't their ships or their technology. It's their minds, their ability to understand and outmaneuver, not just militarily, but culturally and psychologically as well. Nexar leaned back in his chair, his expression pensive. A fact we would do well to remember, my friend. A fact we would do well to remember indeed. Nexar leaned forward, a thought occurring to him. Speaker, do you think the humans' actions were really as spontaneous as they appeared? Spiker looked intrigued, his brow ridge raising. What do you mean? Nexar steepled his clawed fingers. Think about it. For the humans to have had a warship with the exact capabilities needed to neutralize the Gorn defenses so perfectly, they must have already had detailed intelligence on Gorn technology and military procedures. Speaker's eyes widened slightly. You're right. They would have needed to know exactly what they were up against. Speaker nodded slowly, his expression pensive. Now that you mention it, the humans did seem remarkably well prepared for something that was supposedly a surprise. Exactly, Nexar said. I think the humans likely anticipated something like this happening eventually. They probably had contingencies in place, just waiting for the right moment. You think they have similar plans ready for other potential conflicts? Speaker asked. I'd bet my last scale on it, Nexar replied. This was too smooth, too efficient. This was the execution of a well-rehearsed plan, not a spur-of-the-moment reaction. Spiker sat back, his mind reeling at the implications. If you're right, Nexar, then the humans are playing a far deeper game than anyone realized. They're not just reacting to events as they happen. They're actively shaping the galactic landscape, Nexar finished, ready to step in at a moment's notice to enforce their vision of peace and stability. Spiker shuddered, a chill running down his spine. It's terrifying to think that all this time the galaxy may have been dancing to the humans' tune without even realizing it. Nexar nodded, but a thoughtful look crossed his face. True, but in a way it's also comforting. Think about it, Nexar said. If the humans truly are that far ahead of everyone else and their intentions are genuinely benevolent, then the galaxy is arguably in the safest position it's ever been. Nexar chuckled. Exactly. The humans seem to understand something that most races don't, that true power lies in shaping the game board, not just playing the game. Speaker shook his head ruefully. I'm starting to feel like a chessboard piece that just realized it's been part of a game all along. Nexar laughed. If so, let us hope that the hand moving us is a benevolent one. Perhaps not, Nexar agreed, but I'd rather have them as the galaxy's chess master than any of the alternatives. Speaker nodded, his expression turning somber. The Gorn certainly won't be challenging them for that role any time soon, not after this. Nexar leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. No, I suppose not. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a lot of races suddenly becoming very eager to improve their relations with the Federation. Speaker snorted. You think? After a display like that, they'd be fools not to. The humans have made it very clear what happens to those who cross them. And what benefits come to those who befriend them, Nexar added. The aid, the technology sharing. The humans are as generous with their allies as they are ruthless with their enemies. Speaker shook his head in wonder. A carrot and a stick, wielded with equal skill. The galaxy has never seen anything like it. Nexar grinned. Well, I, for one, am glad that we're on the right side of that equation. Imagine going up against an intellect that can outmaneuver you at every turn, with technology you can barely comprehend. The two friends sat in heavy silence, the weight of their conversation pressing down on them like a physical force. Speaker's words hung in the air, the implications of his revelation sinking in. Nexar's mind reeled as he tried to process the magnitude of what he'd just heard. After a long moment, Speaker spoke again, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "There's more, Nexar. Something I haven't told anyone else." Nexar looked at his friend, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, Speaker?" Speaker took a deep breath as if steeling himself. "After the incident with the Gorn, Ambassador Hill approached me privately. He confided something that shook me to my core." Nexar leaned forward, his full attention on Spiker. "What did he say?" "He told me that the display of force against the Gorn wasn't just about protecting human interests. It was a carefully calculated move, designed to send a message to the entire galaxy." Nexar's eyes widened. "A message? What kind of message?" Spiker's gaze was distant, as if he were reliving the conversation. Hill said that humanity had grown weary of the constant cycle of war and conquest that plagued the galactic community. They saw it as their responsibility to use their power to break this cycle, to enforce a new order of peace and cooperation, by any means necessary. Nexar sat back stunned. "By any means necessary? That's a heavy burden to take on." Nexar felt a chill run down his spine. "And this faction, they're gaining support." Speaker nodded grimly. Hill confessed that he feared they might one day win out. He had a haunted look in his eyes when he told me, "We are at a tipping point. Either we guide the galaxy into an age of enlightenment, or we plunge it into a darkness the likes of which it has never seen. And I fear that the actions we take in these next few years will determine which path we follow." Speaker fell silent, his story finished. Nexar sat motionless, his mind racing as he processed the implications of what he'd just heard. The fate of the entire galaxy, hanging in the balance of a philosophical debate happening on a single planet, among a single species. Finally Nexar spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "So the future of us all rests on the outcome of this ideological struggle within humanity." Speaker nodded solemnly. "And all we can do is hope that the better angels of their nature prevail." The two friends lapsed into silence once more, each lost in their own thoughts. They contemplated an uncertain future that they now realized was largely out of their hands. The fate of billions, of entire civilizations, lay in the hands of a species they barely understood, a species capable of both breathtaking compassion and unfathomable destruction. All they could do was wait and hope, and pray that they never again found themselves on the wrong side of humanity's wrath. A somber silence hung in the air following Speaker's revelation. Nexar finally broke it, his voice heavy with trepidation. "I fear that we may have already seen a glimpse of the darker path humanity could choose." Speaker looked at him questioningly, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Nexar leaned forward, his clawed hands clasped tightly. "I recently received a disturbing report from a contact in the Galactic Council. According to this source, a human exploration vessel discovered a primitive civilization on a remote planet. These beings were technologically equivalent to humanity's own pre-spaceflight era, only just beginning to harness electricity." Speaker nodded slowly. "A momentous find, but what happened?" "Upon learning of their existence, the human captain reportedly declared the planet to be under human protection. He quarantined the entire star system, forbidding any other species from making contact under threat of military action." Speaker's eyes widened. "That's a bold move, but perhaps understandable, given the need to protect such a vulnerable species from exploitation." Nexar shook his head. "That's the official line, but there are whispers, Speaker. Whispers that the humans' true motive was to secure exclusive access to the planet's rich mineral deposits, which include vast reserves of elements rare elsewhere in the galaxy." Spiker sat back, a troubled look on his face. "You think they quarantined the system not to protect the natives, but to claim its resources for themselves?" "There are even unconfirmed reports," Nexar said quietly, "that the humans have already begun secretly mining these resources, in violation of galactic law regarding the exploitation of pre-spaceflight civilizations." A heavy silence fell between them, as the implications sank in. "If these rumors are true," Nexar continued, It could be a sign that the more aggressive expansionist faction within humanity is starting to gain influence, testing the limits of what they can get away with. Spiker listened with growing unease, the scales on his neck prickling. If the humans are willing to exploit a defenseless species for their own gain, what hope do the rest of us have if we ever find ourselves at odds with their interests? The two friends lapsed into a troubled silence, the future seeming more uncertain than ever. The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, hinged on the whims of a single species, one whose actions were becoming increasingly unpredictable and opaque. As the weight of their conversation settled over them, Nexar and Spica grappled with a troubling realization. In a galaxy where humanity reigned supreme, the line between protector and conqueror may be dangerously thin, and the consequences of crossing it unimaginably dire. As Spica and Nexar sit in uneasy silence, contemplating the implications of humanity's actions, a chime sounds from Spica's communicator, piercing the heavy atmosphere. Spica glances at it, his eyes widening in shock as he reads the message. "It's an emergency broadcast from the Galactic Council," he says, his voice tight with tension. Nexar leans forward, his brow furrowed with concern. "What does it say?" Spica activates the message, and a holographic image of the council chamber shimmers into view, filled with representatives from various species, all in a state of agitation. The counselor from the Yindri Confederation, a usually stoic insectoid race, is speaking, its mandibles clicking with distress. "Esteemed members of the council," the Yindri counselor begins, "I bring grave news. A Yindri exploration vessel, conducting a routine survey mission in an uncharted sector, accidentally jumped into a system that was apparently claimed by the humans. Without any attempt at communication, the human warship patrolling the area immediately opened fire, completely destroying our ship. There were no survivors." The council chamber erupts into chaos at this news, with various representatives shouting over each other. Some are calling for sanctions against humanity, others advocating for a military response. But as the initial outrage subsides, a grim realization settles over the assembly. There is nothing they can do. Humanity's military supremacy is absolute. Any attempt at retaliation would be suicidal. As the grim reality sinks in, a deathly silence falls over the council. It's broken by the human representative who calmly stands and addresses the assembly. "The destroyed ship violated human sovereign territory," the representative states in a cold, measured tone. "Our response was justified. Let this serve as a warning. Any further incursions into human space, intentional or otherwise, will be met with immediate and lethal force. The borders of humanity are inviolable, and we will defend them at any cost." The human representative sits back down, their message delivered. The galaxy has been put on notice. The transmission ends, the holographic image of the council chamber fading away, leaving Spica and Nexar in a state of numb shock. They look at each other, a profound unease settling over them as they realize they've just witnessed a turning point in galactic history. "They didn't even attempt to communicate," Nexar says softly, his voice tinged with horror. "They just opened fire. No warning, no demand to withdraw. Just annihilation." Spica nods grimly. Humanity has shown its true face, and it is one of uncompromising, ruthless power. The hope that they would be benevolent guardians of the galaxy, it seems it was nothing more than a naive dream. "Instead, a new age of human hegemony has dawned," Nexar murmurs, "one where humanity's interests reign supreme and all other species exist only at their sufferance." As the weight of this realization settles over them, Spica and Nexar can only sit in silence, mourning for a future that now seems lost, and wondering how long it will be before humanity's ambition turns from conquest to extermination. In a galaxy where angering the humans is tantamount to suicide, all they can do is hope that humanity's thirst for power can be sated before it consumes everything in its path. Spica looks at Nexar, a profound weariness etched into his features. "What do we do now?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.